We said that we thought discussing the 10-year risk of a serious disease made sense, since it might allow you to modify that risk in some way. So what can we do to modify a risk of dying from cancer? One approach is early detection. Understanding the numbers you hear about a cancer screening program can allow you to share in the decision about whether or not to undergo screening. A newspaper report about prostate cancer screening using the PSA test noted that results from a study of 20,000 men in Sweden showed a 44% reduction in deaths from prostate cancer. But what does 44% fewer deaths from prostate cancer really mean? We'd like to answer this question in the format we're familiar with. Does PSA testing change the 10-year risk of dying from prostate cancer per 1,000 men? If you look at the men's risk chart we showed you in the last section, you would find that at age 65, the 10-year risk of dying from prostate cancer is 6 in 1,000. So let's see if we can find numbers that are comparable in the study from Sweden. The study was published in the journal Lancet Oncology entitled Mortality Results from the Göteborg Randomized Population-Based Prostate Cancer Screening Trial. In the study, the authors followed men aged 64 to 71 for 14 years. There were 10,000 men in the control group who did not get PSA testing, and 10,000 men in the experimental group who did get PSA testing. The 14-year risk of dying from prostate cancer for men who didn't have PSA screening was 9 in 1,000. If you think about this number, it is comparable to the number in our risk table, which was 6 in 1,000 for 10 years. 9 in 1,000 for 14 years is just about the same as 6 in 1,000 for 10 years. This makes you think the study would apply to men in the U.S., since the rates are about the same. In contrast, the 14-year risk of dying from prostate cancer for men who had PSA testing was 5 in 1,000. So PSA testing reduced the 14-year risk of death from prostate cancer by 4 in 1,000, or 0.004. When you divide 0.004 by 0.009, which is the rate of prostate cancer deaths in the control group, you get 0.44, or 44%. The percent reduction in deaths from prostate cancer between the control and experimental groups that was quoted in the newspaper. A more complete statement about the study in the format we are familiar with would be, results from a study of 20,000 men in Sweden showed a reduction in deaths from prostate cancer over 14 years from 9 in 1,000 to 5 in 1,000. And as we calculated, this is a 44% reduction. A 44% reduction, or reducing death from prostate cancer by 4 in 1,000, sounds worthwhile. So why is there a debate about using the PSA test for population screening? There are other factors to consider when deciding whether or not to have a screening test besides the test's ability to reduce adverse outcomes like death. We need to also consider what the next steps are if a PSA test is positive, and what are the risks associated with these steps. Most positive PSA tests lead to prostate biopsy, and this carries a risk. 10 in 1,000 men need to be hospitalized for complications resulting from prostate biopsy. In the Swedish study, only 220 in 1,000 men with a positive PSA test had a positive biopsy. So in 780 in 1,000, the PSA test was a false positive test for prostate cancer, and these men would still be exposed to the risk associated with a biopsy. What if the biopsy is positive? 90% of men whose biopsy is positive choose to have treatment, which could include surgery, radiation therapy, or hormone therapy. 29 per 1,000 men screened have complications of erectile dysfunction as a result of therapy. 18 per 1,000 men screened have urinary incontinence from treatment. 2 in 1,000 men screened have a serious cardiovascular event following surgery. Why do 10% of men with a positive biopsy choose not to have treatment? It may partly be because of the troubling side effects to treatment, but it may also be that the examination of the biopsy specimen cannot reliably predict which men will die of prostate cancer. So 10% of men prefer watchful waiting for signs of cancer progression rather than immediate treatment for prostate cancer. So PSA screening will reduce the 14-year risk of dying from prostate cancer from 9 in 1,000 to 5 in 1,000. But as you can see from the numbers on the screen, there can be troubling consequences as a result of prostate cancer treatment. These numbers make it apparent why PSA screening is controversial. Understanding these numbers allows a man to make a personal decision about having the PSA test in the first place. Return to the Moodle and check your understanding by answering our questions.